Welcome to this OSTC podcast series, If You Stand Still, You Die, a discussion about AI, trading, and how we keep our edge. My name is Emily Oler, and I will be your host. In this fifth and final episode, I have a very special guest joining Rose and Chris, Benedict du Boulay, an expert in AI from University College London. In this episode, we will be discussing the human in the loop, AI and humanity. Thank you for joining me today. So my first question for everybody today is, the ethical use of AI is a hot topic, how it's used and how it's implemented. How do we view AI through an ethical lens, and what is our standpoint on this issue?
I'll pitch in there. It's an ever-moving target, to be frank. Mm-hmm. Obviously, as we evolve more sophisticated AI algorithms, more imaginative ways of collecting data, and we progress the purposes for which we use artificial intelligence, then the field becomes even more complex. But there are things that we can think about now as we want to consider the best way of ensuring that the basic principle of do no harm is adhered to by the way that OSTC is using AI. And I think there's also the very important aspect that we must also consider that actually it would be unethical not to use AI if it's the best tool for the job to improve the prospects of the business and to help the workforce to prosper. And I'll stop there because I know that Ben and Chris will have some great comments on the much greater detail of how you go about actually ensuring that you have the right kind of ethical framework for your purposes and that it evolves as the business evolves.
Yeah, can I kind of come back on this one? One of the problems at the moment is that AI actually really means different kinds of things to different people. So for sure, there's a branch of AI which is very prominent at the moment, which uses lots of data to arrive at conclusions or patterns or potential decisions that you couldn't have done without all of that data. But AI is all around us in all kinds of more benign and less benign ways. So, for example, when you take your phone and use it as a camera and you point it at your friends, it draws a little rectangle around your friend's face. That's based on AI, but nobody worries about that. Again, if you're using Zoom or Teams, you can ask them to create a transcript from the voice recording as people speak along the bottom of the screen. And nobody worries about that. Though I suppose they should worry if they thought that the words that were being created were absolutely misrepresented the words that were being said. When it comes to AI that involves decision-making, for example, then I think the big issue is not so much what decision is suggested, but who owns the decision.
Right.
So in medical situations, doctors are really clear that in the end they are the ones responsible. They use tools, let's say diagnostic tools, to help decide whether, let's say, a particular X-ray shows some evidence of cancerous growths. And it may be that the AI system that spots those is better than the doctor is at spotting them, but the decision to go forward with treatment of any kind doesn't rest with the AI system, it rests with the doctor. So the human in the loop is more than simply in the loop. The human has to be the person who takes the decision, advised by an AI, not the AI taking the decision.
Absolutely. So that brings us sort of back to the point of, in the previous episodes, we discussed all these big data sets and how AI is sort of filtering them out, making sense of them, and then giving us options. So that's really the human in the loop, is to ultimately make that decision. Now, I know a lot of people sort of hear AI as a buzzword and they get really concerned. Is it going to take away jobs? Is it going to sort of get rid of people, right? The human in the loop, the humanity. So how does the humanity influence AI, and how does AI influence us? And where's that definition and that fine line between AI taking over something that is necessarily sort of a human emotional factor, sort of, especially in terms of recruiting? How would you see that, Chris?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for us, obviously, our standpoint on this is, when you think of us as a business, when we first started this process, we always knew that what we were trying to do was improve on our processes that were there, and we focused on recruitment to start with. But from a standpoint of our recruitment process wasn't broken, if that makes sense. So we weren't saying everything we've been doing in the past is wrong and aren't we rubbish at doing it, because clearly we're not, because we've got we've recruited many good traders. But I think being open and honest about the fact that actually we can use this type of technology to open up more doorways and insights into candidates, let's say, so that we can use that as an additional tool to help with the final decision of who we hire. So we've never, from the very beginning, ever wanted, and nor will we want to, get rid of our human intuition that we've relied on for so long. But we obviously do want to make sure that we're making use of the technology that is available to help improve the human decision. So for us, we've purposely made sure that where our tool is being used isn't at that final decision point, so that we are offering the insight on individuals before the hiring manager is making the final decision on who actually to hire. And again, why this always comes back to our ethos behind our whole business. When you look at us as a trading business, like I said before, we don't use huge trading algorithms that many other trading firms use. We use humans who are sat every single day clicking the mouse, making decisions. So we recognize that humans are our most valuable capital, and they have a significant role to play in the recruitment of the future generation of traders. Now, that's not to say that we're necessarily on some, ethical crusade where we would never use AI to do jobs that perhaps don't need humans, a bit like Rose was saying a second ago. But when it comes to, I would say, complex and decisions that do require the experience of the human and some of the intuition of what we've built up over the years of experience, we don't want to all of a sudden just eradicate that, because there's such value in it. It's the combination of the AI tools with the human, which is where we see the much more valuable, the much more value, basically.
I agree. That's a great way of putting it, Chris. And I do think it's always important at this point to also point out that actually sometimes humans can have their biases highlighted when we bring in AI and machine learning systems. So it can go both ways. And I think it's important to recognize that as humans, we're not perfect. And sometimes we have biases we don't realize that we have, and sometimes we have biases that we do realize they have. And sometimes when you start using machine learning tools, you can actually highlight those biases and therefore try to ameliorate for those and to correct and to actually make people more aware of these biases. So it can be a two-way process that can be incredibly useful.
Can I add that in recruiting, it's not enough simply to have the human in the loop and the human as the decision maker. If you're going to involve AI, you have to be really careful about what the data is that the AI system is going to use and how it's going to analyze it. If the data is skewed in some way, if the AI methods are themselves slightly skewed or not the best used in that circumstance, even if there's a human taking the decision, if that human is consistently offered poor advice, that itself would be unethical too. So there have been some very well publicized disasters using AI in recruitment, where essentially what happened was that whatever, as Rose said, whatever the biases were in that particular company in the past, the AI very carefully reproduced them in the future, even though no doubt the AI didn't send the hiring letter. So, it's the whole chain of events, from collecting the data in the first place, choosing which parts of that data to analyze, choosing how to analyze those parts of the data, to provide a suggestion, and then having the human weigh up that suggestion in the context of all of the other data that human will have. On the jobs issue, it kind of goes backwards and forwards. Teachers have been very worried that AI systems would kind of take over their jobs. But, we've only got to see through the recent crisis that human teachers doing their human thing are absolutely central. You can't just park kids on laptops and hope for the best that they're going to come out educated. It just doesn't work like that. And although you can use AI in the classroom as an assistant to the teacher and offload, so the teacher can offload some work, the teacher still needs to be there, very much not just the human in the loop, but the human managing the loop to help everybody in the class.
Right. So I guess that's one of the common myths surrounding AI, that it's sort of this autonomous thing that it can take over every aspect of our life and sort of do all the work for us. And you're saying that's really not the reality. So the bringing the human in the loop, that creates then AI in its best form. So are there any common myths sort of surrounding AI that sort of influence those decisions as well?
Well, there are circumstances where people misuse AI. So at the moment, various militaries are exploring the possibility of, essentially autonomous AI soldiers. Now, whether they get used or not is a political and social decision. And I think that in an organization that defers its decision making to an AI system, they need to know what they're about. So a lot of this is about how the AI is used and how an organization or a government chooses to use it, as much as the quality of the AI itself.
Right. Now, will these sort of ethical decisions be left up to individual corporations and governments, or is it going to start to be regulated?
Well, there's a lot going on in the AI and ethics field. So there are currently attempts in the EU, in the USA, and in the UK to come up with ethical guidelines and regulations. I think probably Rose can say more about that than I can, but it's certainly a very live issue. And the worrisome is when the AI is kind of left to its own devices. I mean, I read recently that something simple, but something just really annoying. When you send your photo in to get a new passport, you have to do it quite right. No smiling, no glasses, no hair in the eyes, all the rest of it. And I always thought that basically some nice person in London looked at your photo and decided whether or not it met the criteria. Turns out not. Turns out there's an AI system sitting there which checks and then advises the human in the loop that the photo either fits or doesn't fit. Trouble is, it hasn't been designed very well, that AI system, and for black females in particular, it gets it wrong about whether they're smiling or not. I mean, that's dreadful. So they get told your photo doesn't work and they've got to send another one in. Now, I know that's not life or death situation, but it's a really nice example of the way that the over-reliance on AI in a way that it shouldn't be is unhelpful, to say the least of it.
And Ben, from my point of view, it's more of a question for you, really. When we talk about it, I think Rose mentioned it on a previous podcast, where there's obviously so many different types of AI. The AI that drives an autonomous car is not the same AI that plays Go, etc. Do you think that delay or lack of clarity around regulation is because of the wide-spanning different uses of AI and the lack of understanding by everyone generally to really get a framework that is robust?
I think that's definitely part of the story. Another part of the story is that there's clearly money to be made by some companies which are building AI-based technologies of various kinds, and governments are often, quite a long way behind the leading edge. So the stuff kind of gets out there before the ethical and regulatory framework has caught up. These frameworks tend to come after the event rather than before the event. If you take autonomous driving cars, for example, it's a very murky situation just now. And there have been some accidents, indeed fatal accidents involving driverless cars. The question is, who's actually really responsible? And it's not at all clear.
I think there's a lot of work being done on regulatory frameworks, particularly from an OSTC perspective, in different parts of the world, because, of course, with offices all over the world, there will be different regulatory frameworks. The EU will have regulatory frameworks. The US has different regulatory frameworks. So it's quite a complex picture. And as Ben points out, the regulatory framework will always, always, always be a step behind where the real innovators are with AI and data, and unfortunately, where the people who want to do harm are also located. So the only way we can really bridge that gap, so to speak, is to make sure that we have an educated population who understand enough about AI to recognize when things don't look right, to acknowledge that there is a regulatory framework, and that's extremely important, but also to know that they themselves must always be keeping a guard in the same way that we have laws in the country, but you need to be careful about what you do. For example, if you go out late at night in an area that's recognized as being violent, then you need to be aware that you're running a risk. So even though there's a regulatory framework, you are putting yourself at risk. And it's a similar thing here, but it's much, much harder because AI and data are invisible. And actually, most people don't understand how data-driven machine learning works, or indeed how good old-fashioned rule-based AI works. And so we've got a huge job to ensure that people understand enough about AI to reap the benefits and to keep themselves safe.
It almost sounds like AI is only as good as the humans using it or implementing it.
And yes, implementing it and using it, and also those regulating it. I mean, there's an interesting contrast in the finance industry that AI gets used to, let's say, check the millions of credit card transactions which take place every minute to spot any that look slightly fraudulent. And I think we'd all agree that that's a good idea. If you get phoned up by your bank saying, look, somebody's been using your credit card, everybody's pleased. But then again, it's not very far from that to when you go to your building society and say you want a mortgage, and they ask their AI, should you have one? And AI say no. And it can be say no for all kinds of reasons, which are actually not actually sensible reasons. There may be just a data glitch somewhere. So in the same general area, you can get good stuff and poor stuff happening at the same time.
So, I mean, the technology is endless, as we've sort of discovered in the previous podcasts, and the applications for AI, absolutely endless, and many different things that could happen. So for us especially, what does the future of this technology look like, and what are the next steps?
Do you mean for us as a business, Emily, in terms of where we want to use it, or do you mean generally in terms of the world of AI?
Let's talk about OSTC specifically. What is the sort of next steps for OSTC with this particular technology, and how can it grow?
Yeah, so we want, as you know, and as we've discussed, we obviously have deployed the recruitment tool to help us obviously select the next generation of traders, which This year, OSTC didn't hire as many traders as normal because of COVID, but we still did manage to deploy our tool with the Indian intake, a Polish intake, and also a latest one in Russia. But we are, we're moving on and planning to recruit, up to 175 traders next year, in which the tool will be an integral part, again, just one of the cogs in the wheel for that recruitment process. And we plan to, continually improve it, add more data to it, redefine, retrain our models to improve its accuracy, and receive the feedback from our own employees on how to improve it. But, we see opportunities, as we spoke about in the last episode, I believe it was, to take this offering externally to other businesses, not necessarily recruitment, but actually the service of getting people to understand that locked within their data could be some answers that they've been looking for to help improve their businesses, exactly like we were with in the first example of recruitment. We're right now developing our mentoring tool, which we're looking to deploy internally next year in Q2 2021. But again, following exactly the same principles, not a mentoring tool that's just going to work on its own. It's going to be a combination of our existing OMs being mentors, mentoring new traders, and using this tool to help do that at greater scale, and also to digest more and more information to hopefully improve them as mentors. Again, augmenting the human capability, not replacing it. Again, is exactly the same ethos throughout everything that we're doing with AI. And again, we want to take that externally with the same ethics and the same approach.
Yeah, and let me add to what Chris has said, that in addition to kind of designing and co-designing the tools and getting them implemented, we're also really careful at looking at how the first few versions actually get used. So the issue about the human in the loop is also about training, about how the human should be in the loop. Mm-hmm. Because they're in a new situation where they've got this new extra source of data about a potential recruit, and they need to know how to evaluate that. And so there's a training element as well, which is also an ethical issue, that we think that you can't just leave the human somehow in the lurch in the loop. You've got to train the human to recognize the value or not the value of a particular suggestion.
How does that training sort of develop based on the different applications for AI? What are the sort of most common things that people have to be aware of? What does AI see that we cannot, and what do we add to that?
I think a big issue is that they should see the AI not as God. They should see it as a tool that can make suggestions in recruitment with a degree of confidence, but they as humans in doing recruiting will see a lot more than just what the AI is talking about. And they need to judge the quality of the suggestions for what they are. So training people to look at the suggestions but not over-rely on them is part of the training process.
Amazing. What does the future look like for us and for others with AI?
Sure. I mean, just speaking personally, in terms of why we're doing this and what we want to get out of making use of this technology for OSTC is ultimately to improve the business's bottom line, to make sure that we are creating technology that has a real use and not just for the sake of it, right? There's obviously no point in doing that. We're not a research firm. We want to be utilizing the data with the help of the expertise of people like Rose and Ben and all the others in their team to create technology that really helps us as a business. So like I said before, make OSTC a bigger better and ultimately safer business for all of us to work in. We want to make sure that we are literally giving anyone anywhere the opportunity to succeed as a trader, and therefore we want to recruit the right people with not getting rid of any of our old ways of recruiting, the combination of the two, the technologies. And also when it comes to the mentoring and the training, again, exactly the same reason. We want to make sure that we are utilizing this technology to help grow our business and have more and more successful traders. Now, we believe that there is great uses for this technology in other firms within finance and outside of it. I think our combination of being a successful trading business and the combination with the likes of Rose and Ben and the team from UCL and Educate Ventures is a really strong combination to be able to take this out as a service to others. So we're very excited about it. And first and foremost, we're putting it to use at OSTC, and hopefully it will come to fruition. It'll lead to great things, obviously.
So endless possibilities and an exciting future ahead for us. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us on If You Stand Still You Die, an OSTC podcast series. We've just scratched the surface on AI and our potential with adaptive technologies. Check back for more podcasts in the new year. Thanks for listening.